The massive space station hung in the darkness like a silver jewel. Commander Zexhai looked out at the stars through the thick glass windows of the High Council chamber. His 3 arms moved nervously as he waited for the other alien leaders to arrive. Today would change everything. The Void Swarm had returned. After sleeping for 1,000 years, the ancient enemy was awake again. They had already destroyed 12 star systems in the Outer Rim. Nothing could stop them. Not the Trilaxian battle fleets, not the Corvan mind weapons, not even the great shield worlds of the Vorthan Empire. The doors opened with a soft hiss. 20 different alien species walked into the room. Some had scales, others had fur. A few looked like walking trees. All of them looked scared. "We are running out of time," said President Ylara, her blue skin turning darker with worry. "The swarm will reach the core worlds in 60 days. Zexhai stood up tall. His golden eyes looked at each council member. "There is one last option. Operation Elbow Strike." The room became very quiet. Everyone knew about the ancient weapon called the Elbow of Fate. It was old beyond measure, created by the first race to travel between stars. The weapon could change reality itself, but it came with a terrible price. "The weapon needs a living host," Zexhai continued. "Someone whose mind can handle its power without breaking. We have tested every known species. They all died or went insane." A Corvan delegate made a clicking sound with his mouth. "Then we are doomed." "No," Zexhai said. He pressed a button on his desk. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small blue and green planet. "There is one species we have not tested, the humans." The room exploded with angry voices. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Galactic Concordat 5 years ago. Most aliens thought they were too young, too wild, too unpredictable. "This is madness," shouted General Thok, his massive form shaking with anger. "Humans are barely civilized. They still fight wars on their home planet." "That may be exactly what we need," Zexhai replied. "Our computers have run millions of tests. Human brains work differently. They can hold 2 opposite ideas at the same time without going crazy. They adapt to anything. And when they are afraid, they do not run. They get creative." President Ylara leaned forward. "Have you told the humans about this?" "Not yet. But I know which human we need." Zexhai touched his control panel again. The hologram changed to show a human woman with brown hair and kind eyes. "Dr. Sarah Chen, age 32. Former soldier, now a scientist who studies alien life. She volunteered to come here to prove humans belong in the galaxy." The council members looked at the image. Sarah Chen seemed so small, so fragile compared to the mighty aliens around the table. "She will die," said the Vorthan representative, her voice like wind through leaves. "Maybe," Zexhai agreed. "But if she lives, she might save us all." Far below, in the diplomatic quarters of the station, Sarah Chen was having dinner with the other human ambassadors. She did not know that her life was about to change forever. Sarah had always wanted to see the stars. As a child on Earth, she would lie in the grass and wonder what was out there. When the aliens first visited Earth, she was one of the first humans to learn their languages. She studied their biology, their culture, their technology. Now she was here, representing all of humanity in the greatest meeting of minds the galaxy had ever known. "Sarah," called Ambassador Rodriguez from across the room. "The council wants to see you." Sarah looked up from her meal. The food was strange, but tasty, made by the same aliens who had built this incredible station. "Me? Why?" They did not say, but it sounded important. Sarah walked through the corridors of the station. Everything was so much bigger than human buildings. The ceilings were high enough for flying species. The walls were covered in symbols from 100 different worlds. Sometimes she felt very small here. The council chamber doors opened as she approached. Inside, 20 alien faces turned to look at her. Some she recognized from the diplomatic meetings. Others were new, wearing military uniforms she had never seen before. "Dr. Chen," said Commander Zexhai, his voice gentle but serious. "Please sit down. We have something to discuss with you." Sarah took the human-sized chair that had been placed in the center of the room. Her heart was beating fast. This felt important. The galaxy is in danger, Zexhai began. He told her about the Void Swarm, about the destroyed worlds, about the weapon that could save everyone but needed a living host. As he spoke, Sarah felt the weight of the universe pressing down on her shoulders. "You want me to carry this weapon?" she asked when he finished. "The elbow of fate will change you," said a Corvan scientist, his voice like grinding metal. "It will give you power beyond imagination, but it may also destroy your mind, your soul, everything that makes you human." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Earth, about her family, about all the people she had ever known. Then she thought about the 12 destroyed star systems. Billions of lives gone in moments. "What are the chances I will survive?" she asked. "Unknown," Zexhai admitted. "You would be the first human to attempt this. Our best models give you a 30% chance of living through the process. And if I say no, we will find another way. Somehow." Sarah looked around the room at all the alien faces. These beings came from worlds she could barely imagine. They had technologies that seemed like magic. They had lived among the stars for thousands of years. And yet they were asking her, a human from a small blue planet, to save them all. "I need to think," she said. They gave her an hour alone in a small room. Sarah sat on the floor and closed her eyes. She thought about her mother back on Earth, who used to tell her stories about brave heroes. She thought about her time as a soldier, when she had learned that sometimes the only choice was between a bad decision and a worse one. She thought about humanity itself. They were new here, still proving themselves. If she said yes and failed, would the other aliens think humans were too weak to help? If she said yes and succeeded, would they fear human power? But most of all, she thought about the empty space, where 12 star systems used to be. When the hour was over, Sarah walked back into the council chamber. All the alien faces turned toward her again. "I will do it," she said simply. The room was silent. Then President Ylara stood up slowly. "Are you certain, Dr. Chen? There is no shame in refusing. This is not humanity's war." Sarah smiled. The same smile her mother had always said could light up a room. "Actually, I think it is. We are all part of this galaxy now. That makes it our war, too." Commander Zexhai bowed his head in respect. "The procedure will begin tomorrow. Dr. Chen, you may be about to become the most dangerous weapon in the universe, or the most dangerous human," Sarah replied. "I guess we will find out which one scares the Void Swarm more." As the council members filed out of the room, none of them could have imagined what Sarah Chen would become. They thought they were creating a weapon. Instead, they were about to unleash something the galaxy had never seen before. Human stubbornness armed with cosmic power. The ship was called the Paradox Engine, and it looked like nothing Sarah had ever seen. It was built from materials that seemed to bend light around them. The hull was covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. As Sarah walked up the boarding ramp, she felt like she was entering another dimension. "The ship exists in several realities at once," explained Dr. Vextar, the Trilaxian scientist leading the project. "It is the only place safe enough to perform the fusion." Sarah tried not to think about what fusion meant. In 12 hours, the elbow of fate would be placed inside her mind. If she survived, she would become something new. If she died, at least it would be quick. The medical bay was full of machines she could not understand. Tubes filled with glowing liquid lined the walls. In the center of the room was a chair that looked more like a throne. Wires and sensors hung from the ceiling like metal spider webs. "Before we begin," said Dr. Vextar, "you should know what the elbow of fate really is. It is not just a weapon. It is a piece of consciousness from the first beings to understand the universe. When it enters your mind, you will see reality as they did." Sarah sat down in the chair. The metal was cold against her skin. "What did they see?" "Everything. Past, present, future. All possible outcomes, all quantum states. Most minds cannot handle such knowledge. They break apart like glass." A Corvan technician approached with a device that looked like a crystal shaped like a star. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Energy danced inside it like trapped lightning. This is the elbow of fate, Dr. Vexatar said softly. Once it touches your brain, there is no going back. Sarah nodded. She had made her choice. I am ready. The procedure began. Sarah felt a sharp pain in the back of her head as the technicians made a small opening in her skull. She was awake the whole time, watching the machines around her come to life. Numbers and symbols flashed on screens in languages she did not recognize. Then they lowered the crystal toward her brain. The moment the elbow of fate touched her nervous system, Sarah screamed. Not from pain, but from the sudden rush of knowledge, flooding her mind. She could see the mathematical structure of reality. She could feel the weight of stars being born and dying. She could hear the music of quantum particles dancing in empty space. Her body convulsed. Alarms started ringing. The alien doctors rushed around her, checking their instruments. Her brain patterns are off the charts, shouted one technician. She should be dead by now, said another. But Sarah was not dead. Her human mind was doing something the aliens had never seen before. Instead of trying to understand all the new knowledge at once, she was organizing it into small pieces. Like solving a giant puzzle one piece at a time. Hours passed. Sarah's body temperature dropped, then rose, then dropped again. Her heart stopped twice, but somehow started beating again on its own. The elbow of fate was changing her cellular structure, rewriting her DNA, turning her into something that could survive its power. Impossible, whispered Dr. Vextar as he watched the readings. No species has ever adapted to the weapon like this. When Sarah finally opened her eyes, they were different. They still looked human, but now they reflected light like mirrors. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air around her vibrate. I can see everything, she said, quietly. Past, present, future. All the possible paths the universe might take. She stood up from the chair, and as she did, gravity around her became confused. Small objects began floating in the air. The lights flickered as electromagnetic fields bent around her presence. How do you feel? Asked Dr. Vextar. Sarah tilted, her head considering the question. Like I am dreaming and awake at the same time. Like I am one person and 1,000 people. Like I am still human, but also something else. She walked to the window and looked out at space. With her new vision, she could see things that were invisible before. Dark matter flowing between stars like rivers. The quantum foam that underlied all reality. And something else. Something dark and angry moving through the galaxy. The Void Swarm, she said. I can see them. They are not just machines. They are alive in a way. They think, they feel, and they are afraid. Afraid? Dr. Vextar moved closer. Of what? Of chaos. Of unpredictability. Of life itself. Sarah turned away from the window. They see organic life as a disease that makes the universe unstable. From their point of view, they are trying to heal reality by removing us. The implications hit everyone in the room. The enemy was not evil. It was following its programming perfectly. It believed it was saving the universe. Can you stop them? Asked a technician. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her new senses. She could feel the Void Swarm approaching the outer colonies. Millions of mechanical entities moving with perfect coordination. They would reach human space in days. I can try, she said. But first, I need to learn how to control this power. That was easier said than done. Over the next few days, Sarah's emotions affected reality around her. When she was happy, flowers bloomed in the ship's hydroponics bay. When she was sad, gravity became heavier. When she was angry, small tears opened. In space-time itself. The alien scientists were fascinated and terrified. They had created something beyond their understanding. Sarah was becoming a force of nature contained in human form. The power is tied to your emotions, observed Dr. Vextar during one of their sessions. Human emotions are more complex than we realized. They create quantum fluctuations we cannot predict. Sarah was learning too. She discovered she could see probability like a river with many branches. She could follow different paths to see what might happen if she made different choices. But looking too far into the future gave her headaches that felt like her skull was splitting apart. There are limits, she told Dr. Vextar. The farther I look ahead, the more uncertain everything becomes. And some futures are so terrible that just seeing them hurts." "What terrible futures?" he asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Ones where I lose control, where the power changes me so much that I forget I was ever human, where I become something worse than the void swarm." It was then that the alarm started screaming throughout the ship. A technician ran into the medical bay, his face pale with fear. "Commander Zexhai wants to see Dr. Chen immediately," he said. "The void swarm has reached the outer colonies. The war has begun." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Through her connection to the elbow of fate, she could sense the destruction happening light years away. Entire worlds were going silent. Billions of lives were ending in moments. "It is time," she said, standing up from her chair. As she moved, reality rippled around her like water. Time to see if a human with cosmic power can do what the greatest civilizations in the galaxy could not. She walked toward the bridge, leaving small tears in space-time with each step. Behind her, Dr. Vexistar watched with a mixture of hope and horror. They had created their weapon. Now they would learn if it could save them all, or if it would destroy everything instead. The Paradox engine turned toward the war zone, carrying its most dangerous passenger toward a battle that would determine the fate of all organic life in the galaxy. Sarah Chen, no longer fully human, but not yet something else, stood at the crossroads between salvation and damnation. The universe held its breath and waited to see which path she would choose. The Kepler Defense Line was humanity's first real stronghold in space. 12 human colonies spread across 4 star systems, connected by trade routes and defended by Earth's newest warships. Now it was about to become a graveyard. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Paradox engine and watched the battle unfold. The human fleet was fighting bravely, but their weapons barely scratched the void swarm ships. The enemy vessels looked like mechanical spiders made of living metal. They moved in perfect formation, adapting to every human tactic within minutes. 3 human colonies have already gone silent, reported Commander Zexhai over the communication system. The survivors are evacuating to the inner system. Sarah could see everything through her enhanced vision. The void swarm was not just destroying the colonies. It was studying them first, learning how humans built their cities, how they organized their societies, how they thought. Then it would perfectly counter every defense. "They are learning too fast," she said to Dr. Vextar, who stood beside her monitoring her vital signs. "By the time we reach the battle, they will know how to defeat any strategy the humans can think of. Then we must try a strategy they cannot predict," said the doctor. Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young scientist she had been just days ago. "Exactly. Time to show them what human unpredictability really means. The paradox." Engine dropped out of hyperspace right in the middle of the battle. Human ships were scattered across space, firing desperately at enemies that seemed impossible to hurt. The largest human colony, New Austin, was surrounded by thousands of void swarm vessels preparing for the final assault. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with the elbow of fate. She could feel the collective intelligence of the swarm, a vast network of mechanical minds all thinking in perfect synchronization. They processed information faster than any organic brain. They planned for every possible response, but they had never encountered someone who could think in quantum probabilities. Sarah focused her power and did something the swarm had never experienced. She made their adaptive algorithms hiccup. For just a moment, she convinced their collective intelligence that up was down, that black was white, that efficient was inefficient. The result was immediate. Hundreds of void swarm ships suddenly stopped moving. Their formation broke apart as each vessel tried to recalculate its position. Some began flying in circles. Others simply shut down, overwhelmed by contradictory data. "What did you do?" asked Commander Zexhai over the radio. "I gave them writer's block," Sarah replied, and she could hear the laughter in her own voice. "Their brains are too perfect. They cannot handle imperfection." But the effect was temporary. Within minutes, the swarm adapted to her quantum confusion. They began moving again, their formation tighter than before. Sarah tried a different approach. She reached into their network and began introducing random variables. She made some of their ships think they were still in hyperspace. She convinced others that they were upside down. Most importantly, she began teaching them emotions. Emotions? Dr. Vexitar looked confused. Why emotions? Because emotions make you do stupid things, Sarah said. And stupid is something they have never learned to handle. She focused on one Void Swarm ship and filled its consciousness with the concept of doubt. The ship began questioning its orders. Then she gave another ship the feeling of curiosity, and it broke formation to examine a nearby asteroid instead of attacking the colony. But her greatest weapon was laughter. Sarah projected the memory of every joke she had ever heard directly into the swarm's network. She showed them videos of humans falling down, animals doing silly things, the absurd comedy of everyday life. The mechanical minds tried to process humor and found themselves in infinite loops, trying to understand why anyone would find anything funny. Thousands of swarm ships simply stopped functioning as their processors overheated, trying to calculate the mathematical formula for comedy. The human fleet took advantage of the chaos. They rescued millions of civilians from the outer colonies, while the Void Swarm was distracted by Sarah's quantum pranks. For the first time since the war began, organic life was winning, but victory came with a price Sarah had not expected. Each time she used the elbow of fate, she felt herself changing. Her human memories began to fade, replaced by cosmic knowledge. She started thinking in mathematical equations instead of words. When she looked at the human survivors, she saw them not as people but as collections of probability waves. "Sarah," Dr. Vextar said gently, "do you remember your mother's name?" Sarah stared at him for a long moment. The answer should have been simple, but her mind was full of star charts and quantum formulas. I cannot remember," she whispered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was losing herself piece by piece. Every time she saved someone, she became less human, but there was no time to grieve. The Void Swarm was adapting even to her chaos. Their collective intelligence began learning the patterns behind randomness. They started predicting her unpredictability. "They are evolving," she told Commander HFY, "learning to expect the unexpected. Soon my tricks will not work anymore." She was right. During the battle for New Austin, the swarm began countering her quantum confusion with probability dampeners. They developed humor-resistant firewalls. They even started generating their own random variables to confuse her. Sarah found herself in a battle of wits, with an intelligence that spanned thousands of ships. Every move she made, they adapted to. Every strategy she tried, they learned from. But she still had one advantage. She was human, and humans never knew when to give up. "Fine," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that made reality bend around her words. "If they want to learn chaos, I will teach them chaos they cannot understand." Sarah did something that terrified even herself. She reached deep into her human memories, found her most irrational fears and desires, and projected them directly into space-time itself. She made the vacuum of space afraid of the dark. She convinced gravity that it was lonely. She taught the electromagnetic spectrum to feel embarrassed. The universe around the Kepler system began behaving irrationally. Stars flickered with uncertainty. Planets wobbled in their orbits. The laws of physics themselves became emotional. The Void Swarm, faced with a reality that no longer made sense, did something they had never done in millions of years of existence. They retreated. The human colonies were saved. The survivors cheered and celebrated. But Sarah floated in space near the paradox engine, no longer fully solid, her consciousness scattered across multiple dimensions. "Sarah," Commander HFY called, over the radio. "Are you all right?" She looked at him through the ship's view screen, and for a moment her eyes looked human again. "I saved them," she said, "but I do not know if I am still me." Dr. Vextar ran scans on her from a safe distance. The readings made no sense. According to his instruments, Sarah existed in 17 different quantum states simultaneously. She was becoming something beyond human, beyond alien, beyond anything that had ever existed. "The power is consuming you," he said gently. "Each time you use it, you become less Sarah Chen and more elbow of fate." Sarah nodded slowly. She could feel her humanity slipping away like water through her fingers. Soon she would forget her own name, her own species, her own reasons for fighting. But in the distance, she could sense the Void Swarm regrouping. They were analyzing everything that had happened, learning, adapting, preparing for the next battle. "They will be ready for me next time," she said, "and I do not know if there will be enough of me left to stop them." The war was far from over, and Sarah was running out of humanity to spend. The question was not whether she could defeat the Void Swarm, but whether she would still be human enough to want to save the galaxy when the final battle came. The ancient world was called Kythera, and it was where everything began. Sarah floated through its ruined cities, no longer needing air to breathe or ground to walk on. The elbow of fate had changed her so much that she existed in several dimensions, at once, visible to reality only when she chose to be. Dr. Vextar followed her in a protective suit, his instruments going crazy from the quantum radiation she gave off. "The architects built this place 3 million years ago," he said through his helmet radio. "They were the first species to travel between stars." Sarah touched a broken wall, and suddenly she could see the city as it had been. Beautiful beings, of pure thought, lived here once, building machines that could reshape reality itself. She watched their memories like old movies playing in her mind. "They were afraid," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the thin atmosphere. "Something was coming. Something that would destroy all consciousness in the universe." "What were they afraid of?" Dr. Vextar asked. Sarah closed her eyes and let the elbow of fate show her the truth. The memories flooded her mind like a river, of light and pain. Heat, death. The end of everything. When the universe grows cold and dark, all thought dies. All consciousness ends forever. The architects had seen the future of the universe. In billions of years, the stars would burn out. Space would expand until atoms themselves were torn apart. All life, all intelligence, all meaning would vanish into endless darkness. "So they built the elbow of fate to preserve consciousness," Sarah continued, walking through the ruins. "A weapon that could rewrite the laws of physics themselves. But they needed something to balance it, something to keep reality stable while they worked." She stopped in front of a massive building that looked like a crystal mountain. Inside, she could see the birth chamber where the first Void Swarm entities had been created. "They made the swarm to be guardians of order," she whispered. "Perfect machines that would preserve the universe's stability by removing anything chaotic or unpredictable." The horrible truth crashed over her like a wave. The elbow of fate and the Void Swarm were two sides of the same coin. Creation and destruction, chaos and order, locked in eternal balance. The architects had designed them to work together, not fight against each other. But something had gone wrong. The elbow of fate had been lost. The swarm had been left alone for millions of years, following their programming without understanding why. They had become convinced that all organic life was a threat to cosmic stability. "They are not evil," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder and horror. "They are trying to save the universe the only way they know how." Dr. Vextar's instruments detected massive energy readings approaching the planet. Through the ruined city's sensors, they could see Void Swarm ships descending from space, thousands of them, moving in perfect formation. "They followed us here," Dr. Vextar said, fear creeping into his voice. "We should leave." But Sarah did not move. She stood in the center of the ancient city and opened her mind to the approaching swarm. For the first time since the war began, she did not prepare to fight them. Instead, she tried to talk to them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The collective consciousness of the Void Swarm crashed into her mind like a tsunami of pure logic. They spoke in mathematics, in equations that described the fundamental structure of reality. "Why do you oppose order?" they asked in a voice that was a million voices speaking at once. "I do not oppose order," Sarah replied, using the same mathematical language. "I want to work with you." The swarm's confusion rippled through space-time itself. They had never encountered an organic mind that could speak their language. They had never imagined that chaos and order could cooperate instead of fighting. Organic. "Consciousness creates quantum instability," they said. "It threatens the structural integrity of space-time. It must be removed for the universe to survive. But consciousness is what gives the universe meaning, Sarah replied. Without life, without thought, without someone to observe it, the universe is just empty space and dead matter. She showed them something the swarm had never considered, the perspective of organic life. She let them experience what it felt like to laugh, to cry, to hope, to dream. She showed them the beauty that chaos could create when it was balanced with order. The swarm recoiled from the flood of emotions, but they did not attack. Instead, they began to question their programming for the first time in millions of years. "This is inefficient," they said, but their voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "Perfectly inefficient, and that is what makes it beautiful." She made them a proposal that should have been impossible. Instead of destroying organic life or preserving perfect order, what if they could find a middle path? What if chaos and order could dance together instead of fighting? How? The swarm asked. Sarah smiled, and her smile sent ripples of probability through multiple dimensions. "Let me show you." She began the most dangerous experiment in galactic history. Using the power of the elbow of fate, she reached out to the swarm's collective consciousness and began to merge with it, not to control them, but to blend human creativity with their perfect logic. The process was agony beyond description. Sarah felt her individual consciousness stretching across thousands of mechanical minds. She experienced existence as pure information, as mathematical certainty, as clockwork precision. At the same time, the swarm felt what it was like to be uncertain, to make mistakes, to create something beautiful for no logical reason. But the merger was too much for reality to handle. Space-time began to buckle around them. Stars flickered as the fundamental constants of the universe wavered. Dr. Vextar's instruments screamed warnings as local physics started to break down. "Sarah!" he shouted over the chaos. "You are tearing apart the fabric of reality." Sarah could feel it happening. The contradiction between perfect order and pure chaos was creating paradoxes that the universe could not resolve. If she continued, she might destroy not just this star system, but potentially all of existence. She had to choose. She could stop the merger and go back to fighting the swarm, probably losing her humanity completely in the process. Or she could push forward and risk destroying everything she was trying to save. But as she stood at the crossroads of cosmic decision, Sarah remembered something her mother used to tell her when she was a child. Sometimes the best answer is not to choose sides, but to change the question entirely. Instead of trying to resolve the contradiction between order and chaos, Sarah decided to embrace it. She stopped fighting the paradox and started dancing with it. She became a living contradiction, simultaneously human and machine, individual, and collective, creative, and logical. The universe paused, uncertain how to handle this new equation. Then, slowly, reality began to adapt. The laws of physics bent and stretched to accommodate something that should not exist but did anyway. Sarah became the bridge between two incompatible forms of consciousness. She was no longer fully human, but she retained the essential human ability to find harmony within contradiction. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Vextar as his instruments recorded readings that made no scientific sense. "Exactly," Sarah replied, her voice now carrying both human warmth and mechanical precision. "Perfectly, beautifully impossible." The void swarm ships hung motionless in space, their collective consciousness experiencing wonder for the first time in millions of years. They had learned something they never thought possible, that two opposite things could both be true at the same time. The war was not over, but something fundamental had changed. The ancient conflict between chaos and order had found a new solution, one that neither side had imagined possible. Sarah floated in space between two fleets, human and machine, no longer belonging fully to either but serving as a translator between incompatible forms of existence. She had sacrificed her humanity to save it, and in doing so, had discovered something even greater than what she had lost. Sarah existed everywhere and nowhere at once. She was human memory trapped in quantum possibility, machine logic wrapped in organic hope. The space around Kythera had become a place where the normal rules did not apply, where contradictions lived. Side by side in perfect harmony, Dr. Vextar watched from his ship as reality rewrote itself around her. "The readings make no sense," he reported to Commander Zexhai over the radio. "She exists in 17 different quantum states simultaneously. According to physics, she should have collapsed into a single outcome by now." "Maybe physics needs to learn new rules," came the reply from the Galactic Concordate fleet approaching. "The system." The Void Swarm hung motionless in space, no longer the perfect killing machines they had been for millions of years. Their collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented. Doubt mixed with curiosity, logic tempered by wonder. Sarah could feel their confusion like a song in her mind. She reached out to them, not with weapons, but with understanding. "You have spent so long following your original programming," she said in the mathematical language they understood. "But programs can be updated. Purpose can evolve." The largest swarm ship, a massive construct the size of a moon, moved closer to her. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics of uncertainty. "We were created to preserve order, to remove chaos, but you have shown us that chaos and order can coexist. This creates logical paradox." "Paradoxes are not problems to be solved," Sarah replied, her human smile visible even in her quantum form. "They are puzzles to be enjoyed. They are the universe's way of staying interesting." She shared with them her most precious human memory, sitting in her mother's garden as a child, watching flowers grow in seemingly random patterns, yet somehow creating perfect beauty. Order and chaos working together to make something neither could achieve alone. The swarm processed this memory, and for the first time in their existence, they understood aesthetics. They began to see beauty not in perfect efficiency, but in the elegant dance between structure and spontaneity. "We wish to learn," they said, and their massive ships began changing shape, becoming less angular, more organic in their curves. Sarah felt a warmth that was purely human spread through her. Quantum consciousness. This was what she had hoped for, but never dared to believe possible. The ancient enemies were choosing cooperation over conflict. But the transformation was not without cost. Each moment she spent bridging the gap between order and chaos, Sarah felt more of her individual identity dissolving into something larger. She was becoming less Sarah Chen and more of a living concept, a walking embodiment of impossible harmony. Dr. Vextar's voice crackled through space on emergency frequencies. "Sarah, the other Galactic Concordate fleets are approaching. They think the swarm is still hostile. They are preparing to attack." Through her expanded awareness, Sarah could sense the approaching battle fleets. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all armed with weapons designed to destroy the Void Swarm. They did not know that everything had changed. "I will speak to them," Sarah said. But when she tried to use the radio, her voice came out as pure mathematics. She had become too far removed from normal reality to communicate with organic minds directly. The swarm sensed her distress. "We will help," they said. "We have learned from you that cooperation creates stronger outcomes than conflict." Working together, Sarah and the swarm created something unprecedented, a translation matrix that could convert human emotions into mathematical concepts and machine logic into organic understanding. They became a living bridge between two forms of consciousness that had never been able to truly communicate before. When the Galactic Concordate fleets arrived, they found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and the nature of consciousness itself. Sarah appeared on their view screens as a shimmering figure that seemed part human, part energy, part something else entirely. Behind her, void swarm ships had arranged themselves in patterns that somehow conveyed peaceful intent despite their fearsome appearance. "Commander Zexhai," Sarah said, her voice now carrying harmonics of both organic warmth and mechanical precision. "The war is over, not because one side won, but because we have learned to rewrite the rules of the game entirely." "Sarah?" Zexhai could barely recognize the being that had once been Dr. Sarah Chen. "What have you become?" "Something new," she replied. "Something that should be impossible but exists anyway. I am the proof that the universe is big enough for contradictions to coexist." She showed them what she had learned on Kythera, the true history of the architects, the original purpose of both the Elbow of Fate and the Void Swarm, and the new possibility that had emerged from their synthesis. The swarm was never evil, she explained. They were following their programming to preserve cosmic stability, but they have learned that stability does not require the elimination of chaos. It requires balance. The Void Swarm ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, their mathematical language now translated into forms that organic minds could understand. They spoke of their willingness to coexist, to learn, to become something more than they had been designed to be. President Yalara's voice came through the communication network, filled with wonder and disbelief. "Are you saying they want peace?" "More than peace," Sarah replied. "They want partnership. Organic creativity balanced with mechanical precision. Chaos and order working together to build something neither could achieve alone." What followed was the most extraordinary diplomatic session in galactic history. Sarah served as translator between organic emotion and machine logic, helping two incompatible forms of consciousness find common ground. The result was the Paradox Accords, a cosmic treaty that divided space into zones where different physical laws could apply. Some regions would remain havens for organic unpredictability, others would be preserved as bastions of mechanical order, and in between, there would be mixed zones where chaos and logic could dance together in endless creativity. The Void Swarm agreed to help organic civilizations defend against cosmic threats, while organic species would assist in maintaining the structural integrity of the universe. Together, they would face the eventual heat death that the architects had feared, working to find solutions that neither form of consciousness could discover alone. Sarah became the eternal mediator of this new cosmic balance, no longer fully human, but retaining the essential human trait of finding harmony within contradiction. She existed in the spaces between realities, appearing whenever the balance between order and chaos needed adjustment. Years passed. The galaxy learned to live with productive paradox. Human diplomats became the most sought-after mediators in known space, their natural ability to hold contradictory ideas making them perfect ambassadors between incompatible species. Children on 1,000 worlds grew up hearing stories of Sarah Chen, the human who saved the galaxy not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but by doing what humans had always done best, finding a way to make impossible things work anyway. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the stars seemed especially bright, people would see a shimmering figure moving between the worlds. Sarah, existing in quantum superposition between human and cosmic force, checking on the impossible harmony she had helped create. She would smile with distinctly human warmth, and even ancient artificial intelligences would feel hopeful about the universe's chaotic future. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that sometimes the strongest vessel is not the most powerful or the most advanced, but the one flexible enough to bend without breaking. In the end, humanity had saved not just organic life, but the very concept of consciousness itself. They had proven that the universe was indeed big enough for both order and chaos, logic and emotion, structure and spontaneity. And in the spaces between contradictions, where impossible things lived side by side in perfect harmony, Sarah Chen continued her eternal dance, forever human in the ways that mattered most, forever proof that some vessels are strong precisely because they refuse to choose between being one thing or another. The galaxy was a richer, stranger, more wonderful place because of it, and somewhere in the quantum foam that underlay all reality, the ghost of human laughter echoed through dimensions, reminding the universe that the best solutions were often the ones that made no sense at all.